Welcome, everyone. I'm really excited about having such an international group this morning. Well, morning in Europe. And we have our friends from Australia. In their case, it's late in the night, I suppose. But it's still really exciting to have such a diverse and very international group here. I will start with the housekeeping rules. This is pretty much a conversation in the discussion today. So feel free to drop your questions in the chat at any time. And David will be curating the chat and passing on the questions to the speakers. And without much further ado, I would like to do a very short introduction round, and we'll just kick it off, I guess. So David, I mentioned David before. He said a few words previously. I met David a long time ago in 2012 in Heidelberg, and we just continued the conversation after he left Germany and founded his Silicon Beach, Australia, and doing a lot of interesting things and very engaging things with working with startups in Australia and curating the community, I suppose, in what we call down under. We have two amazing speakers today. We have Sakshi on board. She used to be a very successful corporate person that used to work in finance. And she's turned just as successfully to social entrepreneurship and founded the Humanism Global. And she will tell you a bit more about the other interesting things she's doing. And then we have Manuel, another Heidelberger. We used to study together. We met at university. Like David mentioned, Heidelberg is a really international place. So Manuel has a very international background, and he turned to social entrepreneurship when he was already a student. And after he graduated, he took it even a step further and funded the first social organization for entrepreneurship, which is now very, very successfully being led by himself. And he will also tell you a bit more about his activities. And myself, I guess some of you know me already. I am the CEO of the Technology, Innovation and Startup Center in Ginsheim-Gustavsburg, which is, let's say, close to Frankfurt, roughly, for you Australians at least, and just to place us on the map. And based in Germany, also with an international background and a great passion for social entrepreneurship. So I'm incredibly excited that we could organize this across continents, and we are having this dialogue today. And without stealing any more of your time, I will just turn to Sakshi, who I think would like to take off from me now and say a few introductory words as well.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for having me. Here down under, we usually start off by acknowledging the land that we are coming from. So I'm coming from Wurundjeri land, and I'd like to pay my respects to the traditional owners of this land and all the elders past, present, and emerging. And for those of you that don't know much about our First Nations people, there are a few organizations that I'd like to just give a shout out to if you want to hear more about our Indigenous people, and that is Common Ground Australia and Our Songlines. So you can give them a Google and read a little bit about our people. So my name is Sakshi, and as Petrucha already mentioned, I'm the founder of a social enterprise called Humanism Global. And what we do is we create textiles education and employment with women from low socioeconomic backgrounds in India, more specifically Pondicherry. And the way we do it is we actually make B2B merch for big companies or retail stores. So all the tote bags and lanyards you see in conferences, the women hand make that now. And also we create like tote bags with other people's art and work and logos for other retail stores. So that's how we create employment for the women that we work with. And to date, we've created more than 100, we've created employment for more than 100 women in the gig economy. And then slowly transitioned into full-time work for 14 women in the center that we have today in the last 4 years. I don't know, time's just gone past me with COVID now. So that's a little bit what I do in the social enterprise space. Beyond that, I used to work at corporate, and then I transitioned into a tech startup, raised some seed funding with Credit Suisse for that one, made a lot of mistakes, learned a lot of things, let that one go, and this was my second startup / social enterprise. Now I'm going to pass it on to Manuel to introduce himself. And also, thank you, David, for sending the link. Really appreciate it.
Sakshi, thank you very much for this great introduction. I will also try to keep it short. Petruchka already said a little bit about the background, how we know each other from studying in Heidelberg. My background as I became a social entrepreneur is actually because my dad is already a social entrepreneur. He's in development aid. My family is from Germany originally, but we moved to Sri Lanka more than 22 years ago. And this is still where a part of my family lives and where I grew up as well. And my dad was in development aid, or is still in development aid. And I came back to Germany to study here in Heidelberg. I studied corporate law, so I can emphasize with Sakshi, not finance, but still close enough. While I was studying here in Germany, I also felt that I want to change something. This was 6, 7 years ago. At that time, social entrepreneurship, the concept of using entrepreneurship to change society for positive social impact, was not very well known in Germany. So we had to start, off with our first social enterprise, fighting quite a lot of barriers. And people didn't really understand what we wanted to do. So our idea was to have a direct trade platform, starting with tea, because Sri Lanka is one of the biggest tea exporters of the world, and only around 4 to 5% of the retail price of tea actually reaches the producers. And we thought, if you could increase that, if you could increase this only by 1%, you can double the income for the farm workers, you can improve their lives tremendously. And our idea was this must be possible somehow to change the supply chain, go into direct trade. When we started off in Germany, we had to fight a lot because people thought we are an NGO, they thought we want to get donations, they didn't really understand what we are doing. And then also I did a lot of mistakes, a big learning curve. I think the biggest learning curve that you can have is starting your own business, right? And so now we changed our concept a little bit. We only work with big corporates. So what we do is that we match big corporates with farmers directly for direct trade. So they can say they have their tea from Sri Lanka, for example, from Suresh, or they have now also what we included is coffee, because a lot of our customers want to buy coffee and tea as well. So we have a network of coffee farmers around the world. We only work with family, family-run tea and coffee businesses, and try to improve the living conditions through direct trade, so that they are able to, get more income and improve their living conditions. Apart from that, just quickly, Petruchka already mentioned it, we started an association for social entrepreneurship to create better policies, better working conditions here in Germany. We were actually the first association to do so. It was very exciting to get recognized by the German government, because again, they didn't understand what social entrepreneurship is. Now we have a big momentum for social entrepreneurship in Germany. It's part of the new strategy for our new government. It's a big part of the strategy for the European Commission. And today I also do a lot of work on policy level, working with the European Commission on new policy, on buy social campaign for corporate procurement. I think this is something Sakshi and my work overlaps. And I'm just very, very excited to hear the experience from Sakshi around the globe, and also from you guys. How it's working in the social economy, social sector in other countries, because as I get into the topic, I see that we can learn so much from other countries and we don't have to reinvent the wheel. So I'm really excited for this exchange today. Of course, do you want to start with any questions, or shall we get into the discussion?
I see a lot of parallels. You both have a very international background, and you both had successful corporate backgrounds. Somehow you decided that was not enough, or how come that you actually turned to social entrepreneurship? What was that defining moment where you decided, okay, this is what I want to do, and not only that you decided to do it, but you're still doing it, which really is the defining thing here, I guess.
Do you want to go first, Manuel?
Okay, well, I can go first because I think for me it's more something that kind of was outlined to me quite early. As I said, my dad is a development aid worker. My family moved to Sri Lanka a long time ago. So I have been growing up there. I've been growing like a typical third culture kid. I think a lot of us here can emphasize growing up in another culture where your parents are from. And of course, I was confronted with a lot of social problems that we have in Sri Lanka, still up to this date. At this time, we had civil war in Sri Lanka going on. One of the reasons that I left is because the situation got very bad. A lot of my friends got also killed in the civil war or abducted. So that was one of the reasons also why I came back to Germany. And I personally was in Sri Lanka when the tsunami hit in 2004. I think a lot of us can remember. And I saw a lot of NGOs coming into the country, a lot of donations, a lot of people around the globe wanted to help. But I saw also a lot of corruption going on and a lot of money that was not well used. And this started, something, I was a teenager then, when I was really thinking about, there must be a better way to help people. And first of all, I realized helping people with money alone is not the option. Often we do you just have to throw money at a problem and then it will go away. So this is not the case. And then in 2006, of course, Mohammed Yunus from the Grameen Bank in Bangladesh won the Nobel Peace Prize. And so I was always interested in social entrepreneurship and thinking about, how can we tackle poverty and other social problems by entrepreneurial means. And then when I was a student in Heidelberg, where we know each other, Petruchka also, I just saw the opportunity to think, okay, let's start my own startup. I did a very, very MVP online shop for direct trade. And then if you once start something, you will get more into depth. You see that the problem is actually bigger and bigger and bigger than you actually thought. And then kind of, it was never actually a question for me, not to go into social entrepreneurship. Still, of course, sometimes, I'm struggling with it and thinking, why did I choose this path, which is not that easy. Yeah, so for me, I was never in corporate. I never worked with corporate. Sometimes I think I miss this also a little bit, with the restructuring and how actually big corporates work. So I went straight for my startup. So that's also why I'm very interested to hear from you, Sakshi. How was it with you? Because you worked in corporate and you did very well for yourself. So I think that's even maybe harder than to join the other side, so to say.
No, and that's a really great question. Also, Jade, totally want to acknowledge your question. We'll get to it straight after this one. Thank you for that. So I'm also a third culture kid. I was born in Kuwait, but my family background is from India. So I was brought up in the Indian schooling system in Kuwait, which we then migrated to Oman, and then we migrated to Melbourne, and then Sydney and Melbourne. So I moved a lot, essentially, is where I'm trying to get at. And while growing up and moving a lot, we didn't really have family in these different locations we were moving. So we had this real resilience mindset ingrained in us, and also to some degree a scarcity mindset, because my parents were migrants and they were building their own wealth from scratch. And so as I was growing up, it was always ingrained in me that I was going to get an education, and I'm a very privileged person in my family to get the quality of education that I was getting in Australia as a migrant. And so I just thought that the next step forward was to work at a big corporate firm. And so in my process of trying to get to that goal, I happened to do things I enjoyed, and that include a lot of social work. So I helped run like one of the largest mental health campaigns in Australia at the age of 17. I was chairing like a youth council in my local council at 19. And so over time, I just kept doing things that I loved that happened to be social work. And then I also worked in the corporate world, which I also wanted to be at and learn as much as I could. I think the tipping point for me was a book. And the book I read was Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And he spoke about this idea called logotherapy, where finding purpose and meaning helps people get through hardship. And so the importance of finding something that you find meaning and purpose in is really important so that you go through life in the most resilient manner. And I just felt like I couldn't find meaning in the work that I was doing in that present moment. So then I abruptly quit over a 2-week span without notice, not knowing what I was going to do next with my life. It was a very impromptu gut feeling. It was something I didn't even tell my parents too much about. I pretended I got a scholarship to do this master's degree, but I actually didn't have the scholarship at that time. I just applied for it and hoped for the best. And thankfully I did get the scholarship, but it's just a lie that I made up to make things better by putting band-aids on it. And then I built my tech startup, which I got funding for, and it was great, but I just still didn't find purpose in it. So then, and I think going back to the tech startup, when you're in the startup world, there's this huge emphasis on growing something that gives you a $10 billion return, because that's when you become investable. And so that was not something that I found so much joy in. What I was really interested in was the 10x or 10 billion X impact through the work that I'm doing. So I left that and overnight again, packed some bags, went to India, because that is my third home, first home, second home, one of my homes, and spent about 3 months with a not-for-profit there. Instead of focusing on building something, just by being in the space, helping the not-for-profit, which was providing education and textiles to women from low socioeconomic communities, I just focused on the problem. And the problem was that all the women that I was seeing that were getting the textiles education at the center were the same women I was seeing in my evening stroll on the beach, selling things on the street. And so when I just connecting the dots between the problem we're solving, which was to give them access to education, hoping they'll get employment, but what was actually happening was that they were still in the informal economy. That was what I was focused on. And then I accidentally built something. My first few products, I'm not even going to talk about yet because they were horrendous. I sold nothing for the first couple of months. Over time, I happened to be at the right place at the right time. And I put myself out there in every given opportunity that someone was like, oh, I see that you're wearing a necklace. So what was happening is that the women, the community the women come from, they have built this capability, or this way of using copper wire and glass beads to make beautiful handmade necklaces. And they used to sell that on the beach after coming to the center during the day. And so they gave me a ton for a present as a thank you. And I would just go up and do pictures with these necklaces as like a good luck charm. And then someone just asked me where this necklace was from and if I could make them into lanyards. And so that was my first customer, which was a university that asked me to make lanyards using these beads, which then translated into tote bags. And then eventually we accidentally went into the B2B market through event merch. Much like Manuel, Australia is pretty behind and we're still in the fetal stage of the social enterprise world. We don't have proper legislation around it. People mistake me for an NGO as well, but I see a lot of value in bringing together my skills from the corporate world and the business world, and then my skills from social work, international development, and my lived experience, and bridging them together. And so that's how my social enterprise journey went. It was a bit all over the place. It was a bit of a squiggle, a bit of putting myself out there and hoping for the best. Also, I did see a question that Jay just said that he's working in Oxfam, Australia, looking after websites, would love to start a social software business if I can find the right idea and perhaps a few people to help. Ooh, okay, Manuel, taking that particular comment, how would you, I have a question for you. What would be your advice around how to come up with the right idea when it comes to a social enterprise?
Thank you very much. And first of all, I think it's really always amazing because like we have some different backgrounds on the one side, and obviously, you know, you're on the other side of the world. I've never been to Australia, but I feel there are so many similarities. And also what I see is that always the most successful social entrepreneurs, they kind of work on a topic which is close to their heart. So I see this with you as well. And I think also coming to the question, this is like one of the things that I would really recommend, at least a social entrepreneur, that it goes for every entrepreneur probably to do work on something that, you know, you're really excited about. Of course, I have some friends who are like in the general startup scene, and so that you always think about the exit and these kind of things. We don't really have exits in the social entrepreneurship scene. So you should do something that is really, you know, you really have a personal connection to, and it's really important to you also to be authentic enough to, in the end of the day, sell it, whether or not it's donors or it's funders or it's customers. It's, you're always selling something, and for this you really need to be authentic, and it should be something that, you know, also coming from lived experience. Coming to the question, about finding an idea, there's always a lot of talk about this. We also do a lot of projects in our association about, you know, ideation, reframing, have a lot of social entrepreneurs here in Germany with this topic, you know, how can they create an idea or become better with an idea. What we always say is that fall in love with the problem, not with your solution. And again, I think this is true for, you know, entrepreneurs from all areas, but especially for social entrepreneurs. And I see this a lot, that people, especially when you come, you know, from tech, we have a lot of tech social enterprises now coming up, which I think is great. That people are too focused on the solution that they already have. Like some years ago, we had this big hype with blockchain for impact. And there were also a lot of funds for this available, but everybody wanted to use a blockchain. And then when you really looked at how this is applied, does it really make sense to use a blockchain, right? It sounds great, maybe, I don't know, some funders will like it, but you don't solve a social problem just by, you know, throwing tech at it. So the question is always, you know, what actual problem you like to use, and then in the end, you know, you will find out you should be open to what kind of solution do you actually, technical solution, do you actually apply. I have also an example for this. We did a very exciting project together with Harvard University, the Fine Cacao and Chocolate Institute. So they are the leading scientists on chocolate. And because of one of the good things that came out of COVID, because they contacted us, which probably wouldn't have happened before COVID, that they want to do farmers education training. And they were thinking about how to train farmers in times of COVID-19, when actually the farm trainers couldn't go to the farms anymore because of lockdowns. And at the same time, the big companies, they stopped their procurement because they couldn't send their people as well in this producing countries. So the farmers couldn't sell their cacao beans, and they didn't get any support because also people didn't come, they didn't get any schooling. And we did like this ideation with them, and they came first of all, and of course they said technical solution, we need, you know, a peer learning platform. Platform is always a great idea, people come always with platform ideas. And then we tried to do like a design sprint and look, you know, what do you actually want to solve? And instead of focusing maybe on the platform and maybe on the tech part and, you know, all these nice things that we fall in love with, actually what we want to do is give them knowledge, right? Like, and the solution that in the end we came up with was doing small videos, the farmers themselves doing very small videos. Harvard is checking, you know, like some quality control also from the curriculum. And this is shared via WhatsApp groups. And the WhatsApp groups are done with local NGOs in South America, for example, Honduras with the church. And it didn't cost us any money. We had this little problem with Facebook blocking us for spam, but then we talked to the Facebook guys and it was okay. And so that's again, right, like focus on the solution. What do you want to achieve? And then maybe it's not sexy. It's more sexy if you say, oh, I have a technical solution, I have a platform. But in the end of the day, you know, we can still use WhatsApp, and it didn't cost us much. And we reached 5,000, like they reached 5,000 farmers. We only played a very, very small part in it. So that is, you know, the experience that I have. Yeah, I don't know, but can you relate to that? I'm sure, you know, many of you have similar experiences when we start working at something that at some point we realized that the solution we had in mind was not the right solution. Can anybody emphasize on that, or do you have similar experiences?
I mean, for me, I agree. I was always obsessed with the problem rather than the solution with my second startup. I think with my first, I could have done a better job of being more obsessed with the problem rather than the solution I had in mind. So I'm lived experience of definitely think about the problem rather than the solution, because it doesn't work out if you think about the solution. And also just acknowledging that your idea can evolve because it's an MVP as you understand more about your problem. So for example, with us, the problem we were solving was how can we get the greatest amount of employment days for the greatest amount of women? And then for our customer, which is now the big business, the problem we were solving for them is quick, ethically sourced, transparent. When I say transparent, I mean transparent about impact merch. And so we just connected to those two dots. And over time, we also learned that our customers, being the B2B, wanted an attachment, an emotional attachment to the impact they were having. So we then evolved the idea to come with these like upcycled sari boxes impact cards. So we literally just go down the street, get all these sari boxes that the shops would otherwise throw at the garbage dump, and literally screen print impact cards. And each woman that makes each bag signs the card. So that's our idea that evolved over time because we were obsessed with the problems we were solving, not just for the women, but also for our customers. There was also a really good question by, is it Mickey or Mikey? If I've said it wrong, please let me know. But Mickey is asking, I'd love to hear your perspectives, especially given your background in Asia and the Middle East, and how to avoid having your developed country perspective and privilege and power from undermining social enterprises and social enterprise work in less privileged parts of the world. Manuel, what are your thoughts on that?
It's a very good question. Very difficult question, isn't it? Yeah, I think that this is always a problem, and personally, it's a very difficult answer for me because obviously, you know, given my background, I'm white, but if I'm in Sri Lanka, I feel more, you know, as the locals. Like I totally understand, and I've seen this a lot. You know, people from abroad coming in and telling us, right, like how things should be done. So I can totally emphasize now when I'm also in the West, like this, nobody likes that. And by the way, like, of course, like we in Germany or in any privileged country, we also wouldn't like that, but it just doesn't happen, right? So that people just come from abroad and telling us how everything has to be done. Like, first of all, I think it's about acknowledging that every country is different and every culture is different, not even every country, that you really have to look more specifically and involve the stakeholders. So again, if I take the Cacao Academy project, we had to look at each country that we were working on, Colombia, Honduras, and El Salvador. They are not the same, right? Like normally on a business perspective, I would say South America, I have a product, I launch it, they all speak Spanish, but we saw like huge differences also within the different target groups of these countries. And I think the point is always to involve stakeholders and never think that you know it better. And I think this is especially difficult for people that have more expertise on the knowledge, that maybe have been working for many, many years on a particular topic because they think that they are the experts. So the role that I always try to take on is not the one of an expert or the one who has, you know, knows a lot about social entrepreneurship. I might see my role as a facilitator, and it doesn't actually have a difference when I work with social enterprises in Germany or, you know, in the underdeveloped world, so to say, because it's the same thing here. We have donors that are powerful. We have big corporations that are the customers, and you have like also this power imbalance. And we also have this kind of mindset sometimes that people decide over things without taking social entrepreneurs that work on the ground into consideration. And this is also one of the reasons why we founded this bottom-up network for social enterprises that heard when talking with politics, when talking with big corporates. Before we founded the Social Entrepreneurship Network, it was always talked about us and not with us. And I think this is something that I can see. It's the same in development aid many, many times, that people talk about you, but not with you. But still, it's a learning curve, and it's always something I think you have to check your privilege, reflect on yourself, and so it's not an easy question to answer. But Sakshi, I'm also very interested about your unique perspective on this topic.
It's definitely a question I think about a lot, especially in the early days. So my family's background, my parents being born and brought up in India, is technically from a developing country. And I used to go there every 3 months from Kuwait. And then once we migrated to Australia every year because of the cost of flights when you live down under. And so my connection to my country, my country being India, because home is India, Kuwait, and Australia for me, was quite close. And so it does help that I can speak the language, read the language, and write the language, look the part, as you can tell from my skin tone. My accent changes when I'm there. I wear the clothes there. I eat the way that they do. And even after doing all those things, I'm still different every time I go back for Humanism Global, because I have the privilege of an education, which then gives me the power to do lots of things that they don't get to do. And so I made that privilege be a thing that I use to indicate that that is now my moral obligation, to make sure that I bring equity so that people in my other home, being Australia, have access to the same privileges I do. So I kind of just view my privilege and power as something that I have to be mindful of, to use as a moral obligation to give back to the other people that didn't win the same birth lottery as I did in this situation. And the way I do it is what's important. I think it's really important to not go into these situations with, I have the solution, but rather I'm going to have empathy and I'm only going to listen. A really good example for this, which I've learned in the process, is I walked in thinking we need to get a tailor to come in and teach the women textiles. And it just didn't work. That's just not their learning styles. Most of them didn't go to school. It's just something that didn't work. But that was me pretending that I knew the solution. But really, after I sat down, asked more questions, and co-designed the solution of textiles education, it was A, getting a female tailor / manager, B, relying on YouTube, as bizarre as that might sound, but a lot of the women are really good at just figuring things out themselves. So even how to make a tote bag, they learned how to do that through sources like YouTube, and that's okay. And so a lot of the education is actually done by a female tailor, the internet, and just guided by whatever the women want to do. And that's where the greatest creativity comes from. And we still get orders after that. So my point there is that I just go in with an open mind of empathy and listening, and then just focusing on that. And then the second thing that I'm doing now is putting the agency on the women. So as much as I've had a much larger role in the supply chain, ops, logistics, on-site, making sure we get everything churning in the center, as time has passed, my involvement in what's happening in India has reduced, because there's been greater agency, greater confidence within the women that have been in the center for this long. And so I'm hoping that over time, my role is redundant. There's a new CEO that's not me, but someone from the center. And that's kind of how I see my role with the privilege and power that I have. And so that's how I deal with it. It's not ideal. I wish there were better ways, but in my personal view, something is better than nothing if it's done in the right way, by not harming anyone in the process. And that's the most important thing, is being mindful of how you do something and what impacts that has on other people. Is there any other question?
Thank you for your answers. They were two very genuine and very kind of rooted in your own experience.
Thank you for a really great question. Manuel, you mentioned donors. How do donors versus revenue work together in social entrepreneurship? This is a really great question.
Oh, this is a great question, and I would really love to also have the answer from Sakshi, because I can speak, of course, for Germany mostly. I have a little bit insight about other European countries, but I can already tell you, like in Europe, it's totally different. And we just had this discussion with Sakshi in the beginning, right, when you asked me about if we have a legal form for social entrepreneurship in Germany, and we don't have, but in Italy they have it, and in France. And so it's a mess over here, right? But we're still looking forward to it. So it's very, very different. In Germany, I would say it's like 50-50%. A lot of social enterprises have like a hybrid format, which means that they have an NGO, which can also get donations, and they have like their company entity. This is also due to the lack of, a legal form only for social enterprises, which we don't have. This is also what we do. For example, we have an NGO where we get funding from donors from the government or others, and also on the other side, we sell our products. In our case, selling coffee and tea. You cannot do it as a charitable organization, because per definition, per law, if you sell something, it's always business. So no matter how social you are, no matter what you do, it's always business. And this makes it a bit difficult, but we are working on having our own legal entity. And I would say generally in the German scene, it's 50-50% between donors and also between customers. So that's still a big thing. Of course, we want to reduce the the dependency from donors. Would like to move more forward into sustainable business models. This is why we push, for example, Buy Social. If you know, it's a big campaign for corporates to buy from social enterprises. I know that the colleagues in Australia are very active in this field. Social traders Australia are pushing this topic a lot. It's still not so strong here in Germany, but the idea is essentially that big corporates, also the government, buys from a more responsible source that takes care of their supply chain, of their workers, instead of going for the cheapest price maybe, but which is exploitative. But still, we have this mindset here very much that you always have to go for the cheapest option, even though it's not beneficial for society. But we would like to move forward into more revenue from sustainable business models. But Sakshi, how is the situation in Australia?
I mean, not any better, but I guess what I've done in my head is solidified the three most common social enterprise models and how their revenue model differs in the three different models. So the first model is the NGO not-for-profit model. That's 100% driven by donations on just generally. Not always, but mostly. The second one is the profit distribution model. So in Australia, we have this really great social enterprise called Who Gives a Crap, and they sell toilet paper. And what they do is they put a percentage, I think it's 10% of their profits towards a NGO. And so that is a profit distribution model. Mickey, if I got the percentage wrong?
No, I think they go 50.
50.
Who Gives a Crap do 50, and I think.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for correcting me. 50% distribution model. So that is a profit distribution model. That is not driven by donations, but what they do is they technically get their consumers to donate 50% of their profits, which we don't know the exact numbers on because they've got expenses to minus off their revenue, but they still make a very large donation on behalf of the consumers. And then the third model, which is the employment creation model, that's the hardest model. That one is the model that Humanism Global is on. So technically our impact is an expense because our impact are our wages that go to the women, plus all the other expenses that also go towards the women's well-being, like social club, food, etc. And so with that one, the way that we operate is in a partnership model. And so we partnered with an NFP. In Australia, if you have a DGR status, I know I'm going real technical here, but if you have a DGR status, essentially you can give someone a tax invoice if they donate to a DGR status NGO or NFP. What that means is that they'll get a tax incentive if they donate to this particular NGO. So what we've done is we've kind of separated our partnership model with the NGO and us. The NFP/NGO, they work on fundraising and donations for the employment, the education part of our work, and we focus on the employment. So we focus on the BD and sales to keep that churning. So that's how it works in my head. But like Manuel said, there's nothing so legitimized in our legal system in Australia. But I know that there are other European countries that have legalized it in so many ways to give more incentives and drive this industry a bit more and sector a bit more. So I can only hope and pray that it will come towards you first, and then we'll always get that last, but we'll get there.
Perfect. Gian, I hope I pronounced it right, has a question. So my question is, how can you build a social enterprise which can be still a financial success, yet hold on to your purpose? In particular, what is the mindset that the founders should have? A very interesting question. Maybe Sakshi, do you want to follow up on that?
Oh, yes, sure. So I started off Humanism Global thinking that would be my full-time gig and I will get financial success from that. And that for me was defined as success. But over time, I became so obsessed about my problem and my business model that day in, day out, just before I sleep, just as I wake up, I was only thinking about that. So the healthiest decision for me was to separate my goals and my version of success to then be, I want Humanism Global to have X amount of revenue turnover every year. And I want this to scale X in terms of our impact every year. But I also need to have other work. So I'm not constantly thinking about this because that is what's healthy for me. So I have other work that's not Humanism Global intentionally because that helps me separate my brain from thinking only about humanism. In terms of how you can build a social enterprise while having financial success, yet holding on to your purpose. I think with the purpose part, that's a more deeper question. The Simon Sinek why, how, why, what, how video really helped me decide on my purpose and what work I do around that purpose. And that's not all Humanism Global work, that's other work. And that other work gives me the financial success that I'm looking for. So it doesn't have to mean that your social enterprise pays for all your bills. It can and it should if you wanted to. But for me personally, I don't want it to at the moment because I'm not that kind of person that can focus on one thing. And if I do, I'll be too obsessed about it. And what mindset you should have is a very open mindset. Old me was really fixated and very stubborn. So old me was full-time humanism. That's all I'm going to do. But after burning out and learning the hard way, I was just more open-minded on what my version of success could look like and all the things that give me purpose. What does that look like? And then another mindset I would add to that is a growth mindset. So just taking everything as a learning opportunity. But yeah, that's all I've got. What about you, Manuel? I'd be interested to see how you think about this.
I think you made some absolutely great points. Personally, I think it's a lot about culture, the culture that you try to develop within your social enterprise. And in Germany, we have a movement which goes in the direction of steward ownership. And probably when we're going to have a social enterprise legal entity, it's going to have to do something with steward ownership, which means that basically the company owns itself and is run by the employees. And one of the topics that I also like to focus on besides social entrepreneurship is a lot what we call new work, new ways of organizing work, new ways of organizing, working together. And we also have a big momentum for corporate democracy in Germany. Some of the social enterprises are drivers for corporate democracy. So without getting too much into it, but in generally, there are different forms of how they decide things. And there's actually one of my friends, he did a brand of cola, of premium cola, and they are a collective where they decide everything, but not only the workers, but if you buy one Coke, you can co-decide how this whole system is run. And they sell over 2 million Cokes a year. And you think this will not work. but they have like systems where everything works and everybody can, you know, make their voices heard, and they have a consensus democratic thing. This means that it's not like majority democracy, like in the end, everybody has to agree, or it has to be agreeable. So it took them, I think, over 10 years to get this thing running, but they have like a very, very great relationship with their suppliers, who can also co-decide with their customers. And they did, you know, they're very resilient in crisis. So I think this is something that you need to think about in our social enterprise. Even though we are a normal company, because there's no legal entity, as I said, we kind of wrote down in our founding documents that we also have like this profit distribution model. 50% of our profits are going back to the farms. So this is something that we can't change afterwards. And also, on the other hand, that we have a purpose, that we found this company for this distinct purpose. Still, of course, in our daily lives, I mean, we as the founders, we could, you know, divert from that, have a mission drift. So I think the best option is to include as more and more people in this process of decision making, to have it more democratic. And I think this is very difficult. And I've seen also, you know, personally, a lot of, you know, social entrepreneurs who did great stuff and great things, but maybe the time changed or circumstances changed, and they kind of kept on their old ways. And a lot of them, even though they have a great impact, knowing people that worked with them, they're in very, very difficult employers. And this is also as more, you know, because we are driven for our passion and we know we do something good. So we are not always good employers, social enterprises. And I think we should check ourselves on that. And I think the solution is, in the end, for a founder, at some point, giving away power. Because for me, everything else, if you don't give away power, if you just say it's your mindset, it's, I don't know, blah, 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 in your DNA, it doesn't really have a value. The moment you redistribute the way decisions are being made, like legally, your employees, the people in your supply chain, they can co-decide. That's the moment when you, I think, really secure that you won't have a mission drift. But I know this is very, very hard for founders. And that's probably not the first thing that you start with. But to start with the right mindset, as Sakshi said, is definitely the right thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, while you were speaking, another thing that came to mind is sometimes as a social entrepreneur, you can feel guilt when it comes to charging people a larger amount or expecting people to pay you for the social work you're doing. And it's definitely another mindset shift that I needed to have, is that I can do social good and expect to get paid the same amount that I would if I was running a non-social enterprise. And that's an okay expectation. If anything, you should be getting paid more to be doing work that is impacting the world in a positive way, if we just think about it logically. However, I think another mindset is being okay with making money while doing good work. That was something that I really had to push through, even though I came from a finance background. And another thing to be mindful of is people will pay the extra premium for the additional social impact that it comes with. So you should consider doing that and then making sure that your numbers align if you decide to make whatever social enterprise you're working on your full-time gig that is your bread and butter.
I think you guys touched on so many really, really important points in here. And unfortunately, it's with a very heavy heart that I must draw your attention to the fact that we only have a few minutes left. But I've taken a lot of insight into a lot of topics today. I really, truly admire your passion and your authenticity, both of you. Empathy was another big word that we've heard today. Being a facilitator rather than telling people what to do. You didn't explicitly say that, but you touched upon the fact that as an entrepreneur, and especially as a social entrepreneur trying to do good, you have to take care of yourself and of your mental health as well. And your mindset is incredibly important, just with any other entrepreneur, by the way. And the company culture actually could get in the way at some point, if I understood that correctly. And all these points and insights lead me to the next thought of how about we continue this conversation? I see so many similarities, and I think we have so many things in common, although we are so far away geographically. But in the mindset is just pretty much right there on the spot, quite alike. And I would love to see this dialogue continuing. And David, I think it's up to the two of us to organize a follow-up in the coming probably months. I would guess in a 3-month time, maybe just like a quarter of a year or something like that. And I hope you would like to continue this conversation as well, especially the two of you, the speakers, but also obviously the people listening and contributing with their questions. And since we do have actually 4 minutes left, I would love to see another question, one final question, and a few closing words, if you don't mind.
What is an acceptable? We have a question from Michelle in the chat. What's an acceptable percentage of profit for running costs, including wages?
It really depends on your type of social enterprise business model. Manuel, do you have a response to that?
Yeah, as much as you can get. No, like basically, I think a lot of people in our sector, we are a little bit concerned about what is, acceptable. But in the end of the day, it's very hard to earn money anyways, being socially responsible. And if it's true what Sakshi said, there are customers, they want to pay a premium. Also, big corporates are going more into due diligence. In Germany, we have like more strict laws now with supply chain. But that being said, my experience is that price is still a big thing. And unfortunately, as long as companies can kind of outsource all the ecological and social problems and make their products cheaper, they will always have kind of an advantage. So in the end of the day, I would think really that try to get the price which is which the market give you, and which is also valuing the work that you're putting in. And I like what Sakshi said, that in a perfect world, right, social entrepreneurs would get more because they're taking care of the society and the environment, and not less than others. But knowing that it's difficult anyway enough, I think this is not something that we should be bothered too much about thinking about, is this too much profit or is this unacceptable? At least that's my.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I didn't hear what you said.
Well, I'm just going to back my own words and say, yes, you should be paying yourself as much as you can. However, I also like taking learnings from just the startup mentality. So I would treat your pricing with a startup mentality around what is the price point that my customer is willing to pay for a product like this. And so just take it like a startup rather than a social enterprise when it comes to your percentage of profit. As a benchmark for myself, I know that B2C is very much higher than B2B. So business to customer, if you're in an e-commerce world, I can only speak to that because I'm not doing tech in social enterprise world. But in the e-commerce world, when it comes to business to customer with what you're selling, I would try and do as, I feel like my customers are going to hate me for saying this out loud, but 70 to 80% margins, they're pretty good because they're going to be paying off your admin costs as well. And then B2B, your margins will be lower, but your actual profit number will be quite high because of purely the quantities you're creating and the value that you're getting from that. So that's usually the benchmarks I keep for myself, is like a 70 to 80% on my B2C store, and then really depends on the quantities, but it ranges from about 20 to 50% for B2B. I hope that was helpful. Okay, thanks. Thumbs up always means good. What are your thoughts on generating a lot of capital first, using the company to invest in it invest it in the NGO side. I believe that is easier to achieve that, and you have a bigger overall impact. Thoughts on generating a lot of capital first, using the company to invest in the NGO side. What are my thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on that, Manuel?
Florian, maybe you can get more into, like, do you think about a profit distribution model, or do you think, like, in general, whatever you do, first make money and then you can do something positive for the world with it? Maybe you can.
I would straight up do a sorry, did I interrupt you again? My Zoom is playing up.
No, say, what do you want to say?
So just to be clear, the question is, would I do a profit distribution model with an impact straight up, or would I first just sell a product without an impact and then move on to a profit distribution model? Is that the question?
Florian, maybe you can clarify.
Yeah, I think, well, when we understand a question like that, maybe Florian can clarify, but in general, I would say, yeah, it kind of makes sense to go this way. I mean, first of all, you have to think about how you can be profitable and, you know, sustainable from a business standpoint. That being said, and I think we come back to this culture, what I see with a lot of friends of mine who are then drifting more into the conventional startup world is that when is the point that you feel now is enough? And now I can, you know, and I have friends who did like million dollar investments, and then this puts another pressure on them because they have investors. And actually none of them actually really reach the point where they say, well, now I have time to invest in NGOs. But for example, we have a lot of very old impact investors who are like very old, I'm sorry, that's a little bit bad, but old impact investors who are already like close to retiring and did a lot of money. And they have a lot of money and they want to do something good, but they earned their money, you know, on the conventional side of business their whole life. And then they're so surprised that they talk with us and we are not like, oh, well, you have $1 million to give us. It's very easy. No, it's not easy. Like bringing somebody in with their own thoughts. And as I said, just throwing money at something is not that easy. And a lot of people are a little bit, have reservations of taking investors in, especially from the conventional business side, out of good reasons. So again, doing something good and doing social entrepreneurship is not that easy. So I think, yes, generating revenue first is good, but then secondly, you should keep in mind how you want to have your focus. Okay. No, the question is about the focus. You always have to be sustainable and socially conscious. I think focusing on the company first and building an NGO later might be easier and has a bigger impact.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. I hear the question. Oh, sorry, Manuel. Did I interrupt you again? Oh, my bad. I get the question. So if you build a company and then build an NGO on the side, because now as a company, based on whatever product and service you're doing, you've created so much capital, then you can put in a dollar amount on an NGO side arm that you've created. That is definitely one way of doing it. In fact, I think effective altruism would argue that that is one way of doing it that provides you a quick like dollar impact per dollar measurement, which is great. I think for me personally, I think that's a personal choice, and I don't think one is better than the other. With something that is a social enterprise that you are running, you are so close to the impact and you see everything from start to finish. So for me, I don't just see the women getting employed, I see the women getting higher confidence, higher self-worth. I can watch them giving back to community more with the money that they're making. I can see their children going to school. All those aspects, I would not be able to see the impact of or have control over as much as I would if I went down the capital route of building my own company, building capital, and then creating an NGO arm. So there's this level of like how much control you want, how close you are to impact, and how much effort you want to put on that impact. And that's just a personal decision and view. I don't think, my personal opinion is, I don't think one is better than the other, but that is definitely a controversial question. What do you think about it, Manuel?
Yeah, maybe also looking at the time, but I can keep it short. So thank you very much for clarifying. Yeah, I would definitely also say it's a way to go. I don't think there's right or wrong. I think, you know, whenever you have doing something socially conscious, it's already positive. And we work also with a lot of big corporates. And for this model, for me, would be more in corporate social responsibility than actually social entrepreneurship. But what I want to say is that don't make the mistake of thinking that the money making is the easy part, because I speak to donors like all the time, and there's money. And when I work with the European Commission, we have now 1.8 trillion recovery fund for COVID, and not all goes into the social sector, but a lot of it, and a lot of this money will be wasted. So the thing is always that throwing money at a problem is not the solution. I know that sometimes we think it is, but if you really look at the problem, and especially if you want to scale it, at some point you can maybe invest some little money to help people, but if you want to do it on a systemic level, money alone will not help solve it. So the effort that you have to invest in your company to earn, and the effort that you have to have an NGO branch that has an impact, for me it's the same. Like, it's the same difficulty. It's different earning money and on the other side having an impact, but it's 50-50 of the energy that I put in, because otherwise it wouldn't work. Or you work together with already existing NGOs who only specialize on that. And as Sakshi said, there's nothing wrong with it, but please don't think that once you have the money, the other part comes easy, because it doesn't.
What a great closing word, I shall say. And I would love to continue this conversation today or any day, but I'm afraid we really have hit 11 o'clock, past 11 o'clock in Europe. And it must be late at night with you guys in Australia. But thank you so much for such an inspiring event. I feel really, really moved by everything I've learned today. And a thank you to all the participants that truly interacted with the speakers and asked incredibly meaningful questions. I couldn't have had an easier job at moderating this, because everybody else did the work today. So thank you very much indeed. And for a lasting impact, David, we have to get together and see when we do a very worthy follow-up of this, if you all agree. I'm very much looking forward to it.
We definitely will do that. And thank you, Sakshi. Thank you, Manuel, for sharing your wisdom with all of us. And we're looking very much forward to have one or both of you back here on stage soon again.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for having us. Thank you for the great questions.
Thank you, everyone.
You.